If you're planning to get or you own an Altmill CNC router from CNC Labs, whether it's a 2x4 or a 4x4 Altmill CNC router, then this video is for you, because I've had a ton of Altmill CNC router owners ask me to create a video to teach them how to design up and carve a grid in their Altmill CNC Router Spoilboard. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm Garrett Fromme, a CNC expert and the owner of IDC Woodcraft, the company that provides you with the CNC router bits to carve out your amazing CNC projects. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to design your Altmill grid in the software. We are going to create the toolpaths. I'll tell you what CNC router bit you need to use, and of course we'll save it in the G code and take it out to your CNC router so you can carve yours. Now you're going to get some extra perks in this video because I'm going to teach you some advanced tools in the design software that I use, which is Vectric, which you will be able to use in future projects and elevate your design skills. Not only that, but you are going to get a big perk out of the way we are going to design this grid and where we're going to place it very specifically. So before we get into the design software, the first thing we have to do is understand something about your Altmill CNC router. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Let's go. IDCWoodcraft.com. Before you design your grid, there are two things you need to take into account with your Altmill CNC router. The first one is the max travel distance in the X and the max travel distance in the Y. The Altmill 4x4 has a max travel distance of just a little over 49 inches by just a little over 49 inches. The Altmill 2x4 has a max travel of just over 49 inches by just over 25 inches. And so when we build your grid, it's going to be based on that size of a project. So you can take advantage of the entire grid space or the entire spoilboard space. The way to determine max travel on your Altmill is to first send it to the home position. Once it's in the home position, you should either see X and Y 0 on your readout or set X and Y to 0. But you're going to notice the little numbers underneath each X and Y and Z. They are going to be at 0. Those are the machine home coordinates. In other words, those numbers will always be based off of that position right now. Now, what you do is you simply move the machine as far to the left and far to the front as possible. Do it in a rapid move. And the machine will automatically stop at some point in this corner right here. What you've done is you've brought the machine to its soft limits going forward and soft limits going over to the right. What soft limits are distances that is built into the software that will say that when the machine moves to this amount of distance based off the machine home, it will stop. It's a protection to prevent the machine from crashing into the side or crashing into the front. What you do now is just read the numbers off of your readout here. Mine is 49.055 in the X direction and minus 49.055 in the Y direction. So that is the max travel of my Altmill CNC router. And I'm going to use the 49 by 49 when we get into designing our grid. And so will you, as you will see. The second thing you want to take into account with your Altmill is the home position. So all Altmill CNC routers have a home position in the back left corner of the machine. And that is the point at which we will start our grid lines, where when the machine is home, it'll dive straight down and start carving. Why is that such a big deal? It's because when you actually start carving your grid line from the machine home position, every grid line is going to be a factor of 4 inches from that home position, or 100 millimeters in both directions. What that means is that every XY intersection point on your machine will be a known location from the home position. So if you put your project piece, your corner that you've designated as the origin for the project design, and you put it right on that intersection point and you line it up based on the grid, not only have you squared your project piece up, but you have a known location from there. And if you ever lose the X and Y position, you can always send the machine to the home position, zero it out, and then tell it to come forward the grid line. So it's 4, 8, 12 in Y, and then 4, 8, 12 in X. And that is the corner here. In fact, there's one better on this one, is you can design your project piece on a template based on the grid, where you open your project design and it has the grid in it already. And you just design your project somewhere on that grid. And then you place the project piece on the appropriate grid on your machine, send the machine home, zero it out, and start your program from there. In other words, you don't probe X and Y, because your X and Y 0 points are the machine home. That's your project origin. That's actually a better way of doing it. It's the way I design my projects from now on, because it saves me from having to lose X and Y. I just send it home and that's it. So that's the big benefit to that, where it really will make it a lot more convenient for you as a CNC creator to place your project and know exactly where you're placing that project relative to machine home. I hope that makes sense. If it does, let's start off with a thumbs up. Now we're gonna get into the Vectric software and start designing your grid based on your Altmill 2x4 or 4x4. I'm gonna design the 4x4. You just follow along. If you're using a 2x4, then you just design based off the 2x4. A quick note before we begin. You need to have your spoil board surfaced before you actually start cutting the grids on your machine, because you want the spoil board to be flat. So if you haven't surfaced your spoil board and you want to know how to do it, I've got a video and I will link that down below in the description of this video. In order to create the grid for your spoil board and carve it, we need to set up our job to the max travel of your machine. So I know with my Altmill, the max travel is a little bit over 49 inches. And so my width is set up to 49 and my height is set up to 49, because it's a 4x4, but it actually travels 49 by 49. We need some kind of thickness. The thickness doesn't matter as long as you have something there. Now, when we cut the grid, we're going to cut it on the spoil board surface, so our Z0 position needs to be on the spoil board material surface. And then our XY datum, this is important. You want this to start at your machine home position. And then we'll click OK. And now our spoil board is now set up to create our grids. Now it's time to draw the lines for our grid. So the first thing you need to do is make sure your snaps are turned on right here. So when you start drawing lines, they're going to snap from the specific location, or start from the very specific location that you want to start it from, which is the origin point or the home position of your machine. For the Altmill, when I send it home, this is going to be the position that I want the grid to start to get carved at. In order to do that, we're going to go draw our basis lines. So we're going to grab a straight polyline. With the grid snaps turned on, we're going to hover over that point, and you see my cursor has selected that point. I'm going to click my left mouse button once and come all the way across, and then select it again. And now I need to start my up and down line. Now, here's a little cheat for you. Normally, we would have to exit the line mode and go back into the line mode in the Vectric software. But if you're in line mode and you've drawn a line and you want to start a new line, you simply hit the spacebar, and that will stop that line, but you will stay in line draw mode. So now we're in line draw mode. We can draw this one right here, and I've got that drawn. Now we're going to hit escape, and now our two grid lines are drawn up. Now you get to learn a very cool and kind of advanced tool in the Vectric software, where we're going to create our grids, and we're going to use a tool called Array Copy. An array copy will enable us to copy each line at a specific distance all the way down and all the way across, which will create the grid. Array copy is an advanced tool that you are going to learn right now, what it does, how it works, and why it's there. So array copy is a way to copy things across a line or across a space, and then also up and down a space. Now there's two features of the array copy that you need to understand, and that is rows and columns. So we're going to explain this so you understand how we're going to build this grid. We have two grid lines that we made, our baselines. We've got the one going across the top, there we go, and the one going up and down. So we have to make multiple lines going across like this for this line. And then we're going to need to make multiple lines going across this way for this line. So the aspect of columns and rows, you want to think of columns like the Roman columns. So they've got columns in their whatever they are, the various buildings just like that. So a column is something that's up and down. Rows are things that are side by side. And I like to use this analogy of columns for the columns aspect. And I like to use like Notepad for rows. You write on a notepad, and then you go to the next row and you start to write some more. Then you go to the next row and you write some more. So we are going to break this down so it makes sense. We have this line up on top, just like that. And now we need to make more lines this way. Now each line is a row that we are adding when it's like this. When we are stacking on top of each other that way, we are making multiple rows. When we are taking items and setting them side by side, we are creating columns. So when we're doing the grid this way, we are going to add rows so it stacks downward in the design I'm doing. If your origin point is at the lower left corner, lower right corner, then you're going to stack upwards. And likewise with the columns, we are going to stack them to the right in this design. So we are going to do multiple columns that way, and we're going to do multiple rows the other way. Now I want you to understand one more aspect about this, because this is kind of important. It can be very confusing at first. When we make all these guys, we are stacking them in one column. Think about this line as the formation of a column, the first line that we drew. And now we're just going to stack the lines down through that column to create the rows in the column. And of course, when it comes to the columns that we're building, think of this first column as a single row going that way. So we are going to work with one row going that way, but we're going to build multiple columns, if my pen would work. Just like that. When we're working with the rows, which is from the top, and we're going to build downward, it's being built down through at one single column. When we're doing the columns, we are building them through one row. So I'm going to select this upper line that we just drew right here. And we're going to come down to Offset and Layout and hover over this one icon that says Array Copy. Select that. Now we are going to make multiple lines. I don't know how many we're going to make. I think it's 12 or 13. So I'm going to assume 15 rows, but I know one column. So we're going to come up to rows and set that to 15. And then for columns, you're going to have it at 1. You want to make sure that you're using an offset instead of a gap. Just select the offset. Gap would be is if you selected a shape and it'll put a gap between the edges of the shape. We want the offset will make sure it offsets based on the center. That's why we want offset. So we're going to go down every 4 inches and make our copy. And so in this case, we're going in the negative direction. If your home position is lower left, then you're going in the positive direction. So we need, in my case, I need to set the Y to minus something. In this case, -4, since we're copying in the -4 direction, or the minus direction. So with that selected, and we have a -4 in the box, we're going to click copy. And now our lines are made. Now we got to do this line, the up and down line. And now we got to make columns. And we're going to make 15 columns, but it's going to be based on one row. So we're going to switch our numbers. We're going to come into rows and change that to 1 and go into columns and change that to 15. And these are going to go in the positive direction every 4 inches. So the X needs to be a 4 plus. And then as long as we have that line selected, we click copy, and now all those lines are created. We can click close, and there are lines. We have a couple extra lines. We don't need them, so we're going to just delete them. And now we're set up. Well, you've got your basic grid designed. That's got to feel pretty good. We got to do something right now that's really important, and that is save your project, because we haven't saved it yet, and then we'll continue on with the grid. So let's keep going. So to start your save, I'm going to hold Control and press S, and that's going to open up a save function. I'm going to go into my CNC Designs directory, which is something you should have, a CNC Designs directory, so you know exactly where all your designs are at. I'm going to go into that, and I always like to make a folder for every specific job I create. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I always title the folders so they're very clear. We're going to call this Altmill 4x4 Grid. I'm going to copy that, and then we're going to hit Enter to create that directory, and then we're going to hit Enter again to go into it. And now we're going to take that copied name and actually create the file name, Control V, Altmill 4x4 Grid, and save. Now we're ready to do the text on this. The text that we are going to design into our grid is going to identify each line on the grid. These going this way and these going this way. And so you can see right here, I have a Y minus 24. This line is exactly minus 24 inches from the machine home position. And I have my other ones here, so we have a Y minus 28, Y minus 32. Down here for the X, X4, X8, X12, and so on, all the way over to 48. And the same with the Y, we have Y minus 48. And that's the text that we're going to put into your grid now. And the cool thing about the text is you get to play with the array copy function again. Now, one of the things I did not explain about array copy that comes in really handy and how it gets applied, think of the stars on the American flag. Those are array copied. You got the stars going across in columns, and then you get the stars going across in rows. And the stars are staggered back and forth. It's a very interesting way to work with the array copy, and quite advanced. Took me quite a bit of time to figure it out. If you want to know how to design up an American flag and do the stars, then I've got a video that I created a couple years ago. I will link that down below. It's really a deep dive video to really dive into building up a flag. And you'll get a ton of skill with the Vectric software with it. Okay, with that, let's just get into start putting the text onto your grid. Let's do this. Now that you understand what we're doing with the text, we have to actually create it. But we don't want the text to be on the same layer. So we're going to create a new layer for the text itself. So we're going to come up to this section right here where it says Layer 1. Select that, and this box is going to open up. Now, all our grid lines are on layer 1 right now, but I want to name that layer so I know exactly what it is. So I'm going to click into it, and then I'm going to call it Grid Lines and hit Enter. Now we need to create the layer for the text. So we're going to add a new layer, and we're going to change the name of that to Grid Text and hit Enter. And now we can close that menu simply by clicking out here. And we are on the grid text layer, which is what we need. And you understand how these numbers are supposed to be laid out. So here's how we set them up. We're going to go to the text function under Create Vectors, open that up, and just click right over at the first line right there. Now, if you get a really big text box or really tiny, then you can change the text size. I like to set my text size to 0.5, which is what it's at right now. And this is going to be for the Y numbers. So for the first one, this is Y0. So this is going to be Y minus 4. So we're simply going to type in Y minus 4 right there. And I'm going to close that. And I'm just, while it's selected, I'm going to use my arrow keys to just nudge it up a little bit. Now for this one, it's going to be X4. So again, we're going to go into the text box. I'm just going to hover right in here and then click it and then type in X4. And then we'll close that. Now that we have our text in here, now we want to array copy the text. So we have Y4, y minus 4, y minus 8, and so on. So to do that, we're going to use the same array copy function. We're going to select the y minus 4. Going to go back to offset and layout to array copy, and this one needs to copy downward, minus 4 each one. We're going to make one column and 15 rows or 12 rows. It's going to be 12 rows. So we come up here and say 12 rows and one column, and then it's already set to 4 inches apart, and this is where setting on offset is really important. We're going to click copy, and it's going to copy those down on the y direction. For the x, now we just need to switch. We're going to go to one row and 12 columns, and the numbers are already set in here. We're going to go in the x direction, positive 4, click that, and we've got that set up. You now have your numbers on your spoil board, but we're basic right now. All we have is x4, 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 and so on, and then y minus 4 all the way down. We will fix that in just a minute. The next thing we need to do is get rid of that line that's going through each number. So right now, this grid line is going right through the x20 and right through every one of them, same on the y. So we're going to just do a little bit of temporary construction lines to trim those lines out, and then we'll have the numbers isolated from the grid line itself. Now what I want to do is make sure that these lines don't cross over the numbers when it carves. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is I am going to switch back over to grid lines. And we are going to create a new line that is right below the X number, right about there. And I'm going to take that, and you just come all the way across, all the way over to there. Don't go all the way to the end, we don't need it. And then we are going to escape out of that. While that one's selected, Control C, Control V, and what that does is that's copying that line and repasting it, and then you take your arrow keys and just come up, just like that. And we're going to do the same thing with the Y. I'm going to draw a new line. Sorry, I'm moving things around pretty fast. So we're going to come up here to this guy right here. I'm going to grab a line. It's going to be a little bit more spread away from the 4 because as I start adding numbers, it's going to get a little wider. So we're just going to start right here. And we're doing this specifically. You want to make sure you start a new line that's not attached to anything, because otherwise when you trim, it's going to start attaching itself to other things. So we've got that one, and we'll come over here, and I'll just go like that and just go right back up. And that should set us up just like that. Okay, we're going to turn off the numbers by going up to layers and turning off the grid text. We're going to get those numbers out of the way. And then just simply click here. Now we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut between each line. Oops. If you do that, just hit Control Z to undo what just happened to me. And I'm holding my left mouse button down and dragging right through each one of these lines. The way I drew these separator lines, I want to make sure you do it exactly the way I did it. Otherwise, you're going to run into other problems. Now we're going to do that for the X as well. We're just going to drag through and just trim those out. And oops, did it again, Control Z, and I'm just dragging through each one. So now we're set up, good. And now all we have to do is just delete these two lines. And now we can turn on our text layer again. And now our lines are set up. So we got one right here that got messed up. So I forgot to get it. I'm just going to draw two lines. I'm just going to go right there, right like that, right like that, and right like that. And then I'm going to get my scissors. And I'm going to trim between the two, and then we'll delete that line. And that is how we set up our initial text. Now we have to actually change the text. And that's very easy, but you just want to pay attention to what you're doing. So we are going to start with the Y text. We know that this is the Y minus 4 position relative to that. That means that this is the Y minus 8 position. So we're going to select that, go back into text mode, and we're simply going to edit that text. So that's going to be a Y minus 8. We're going to select the next one, edit that one, and that is going to be Y minus 12. And then we would continue on, which I will. I'm just going to go to the X and show you the X change. So I just made a mistake there. We just got to delete that number. There we go. So we have X4, X8, then we have X12, and so on. So I'm going to finish editing up these numbers, and then we'll be back. Now we're ready to get into the tool paths. However, I do want to do a little bit of a touch-up. You see how our lines are running past the X48 line? As far as that grid line goes, kind of runs off and then it just stops. And same with the Y line, it comes down and it just stops, goes past that grid line. I'm not going to use these as a reference below this line right here, so I'm going to just delete all these little extensions. And the way we're going to do that is make sure, first of all, we are in grid line layer, and then we're going to use our trim function and simply hold our scissors down and start trimming these lines away, just like that. It'll pretty things up a little bit. So we're going all the way up and trim them all out. And do the last 4 and we are set up. Sweet, you've got your grid all designed up. Remember, hit the Control and the S button because you got to save and save often. I will keep reminding you about that through the video because I don't want you to lose this. And also, if this is really giving you some value, then please just take a minute and hit that thumbs up. I would love to know a comment down below too if you got your grid designed up. I want to know if you've gotten this far. So do me that favor as well. Let me know. So we're going to get into the tool paths now, but first I just want to let you know that I've already cut the grids on my spoil board. That's how I know how to set all this up and do this video for you. And so I have the G code and the design and all that, and I figured, what the heck, I'll just work this up and make it available to you. So what I did is, I've got the Altmill 4x4, but they've got the 2x4, and there's some people working metric. So what I did is I did designs for the Altmill 4x4 and the 2x4, and I did it in inch and metric. So the inch version, all the grid lines are 4 inches apart, and the metric version, all the grid lines are 100 millimeters apart. And then I created G code for every single one of those, and then I verified them on my Altmill just to make sure that they all work. And the G code is optimized. You're going to see later on in the video that Vectric doesn't do a good job at optimizing toolpaths, so I've optimized them for you, and I'm going to create a video on that. But I just want to let you know that if you want the G code and the design file, then it's available to you for free. You get the set of instructions here that walks you through how to actually set it up and on your CNC, step by step. Free, available to you. Might as well grab it. I will link this Altmill 2x4 and 4x4 CNC router grid cutting instructions with the design file and the G code files available to you in one package. Down below in the description, all yours. All right, let's get into the tool paths. So we're going to switch over to the tool path menu by hitting F12 on the keyboard. And the first tool path we want to create is our grid lines. And we don't want to do the text because that's going to be a different tool path. And this is why we created 2 layers. So we want to turn off the text layer. So we're going to go up to layers and simply click off this little button here where it says grid text, and we're going to turn off the text, and that is off. Now we want to select all the lines for the grid lines, and we're going to go into the profile toolpath. Our start depth will be 0. Our cut depth is going to be very shallow. I like a nice thin line, and so I like to make it a 0.03, and then we've got this little check box right here. We're going to leave that turned on. If you don't have that box checked, check that box. That's going to open up a new section of this toolpath menu, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Now the next thing is the router bit that we want to use. So I do like to use this bit right here. It is the ultra smooth cutting 60-degree V bit from IDC Woodcraft. It cuts very cleanly and it leaves a nice pencil thin line. So if you're in your design software, if that's not selected, you simply go to the select from the database, and we are going to select that bit. And now we look at the bit and we see that it has a 60 inch per minute feed rate and a 20 inch plunge rate, inch per minute. That's too low, but we don't want to change it in the database. We want to change it in the program or this design itself. So we're just going to leave that. We're going to click select, and now that bit is selected right here. And we're just going to increase the feed rate by hitting the edit button right here. It's going to open up the data for this particular design, and we're going to change that to 150, and I'm going to change the plunge to 60. I can go really high because it's not going to go deep at all. Then we'll click OK. Now, right here is where it gets really important. You want to make sure you are set on the line. So whatever software you're using, you want to make sure it's not clicking out or cutting outside the line or inside the line. It has to be on the line. In the Vectric software, we're going to scroll down and we want this toolpath to be kind of efficient. It doesn't have to be real efficient because we're going to cut one toolpath and this is going to be done for 6 months or whatever, a year, who knows. We will not spend a lot of time on grids once we get it made. But to make it a little bit more efficient, I want to come down to this little toolbar here. When we do that little checkbox up at the top where it says show advanced toolpath options, that's what this was right here. So we want to select this tab called order. And you want to make sure that everything is unchecked except for shortest path, and the software will then make sure that it's trying to do this as efficiently as possible. Come down, set the toolpath name, so we're doing a grid line, so we're going to do grid lines, and I like to put the bit that I'm using in that name, so it's going to be 60V, and we are going to calculate. And now there are our toolpaths. So the blue lines, it looks like we're cutting everything. The red lines are all rapid moves. I want to stop for just a second because I want you to take a look at the toolpaths we just created for this grid. You can see there are a lot of long red lines. And what that means is there is a lot of rapid transit moves in this. In other words, it's not very efficient despite us asking the Vectric software to make it as efficient as possible. It just did the best it can calculate. This can be made much more efficient. However, in this video, I am not going to focus on that because we cut a grid once and you may not cut a grid again for another 2 years. And this program will carve out in maybe 20 minutes. So in the scheme of things, it's not much time. However, learning how to make toolpaths much more efficient is a good piece of knowledge that you want to have for other CNC projects. So I will make another video on this particular grid project and show you exactly how to make a project much more efficient. So for the sake of the video, we are just going to run on with what we've got and let it carve out with what we are creating. Now we're going to preview the toolpath. And it's not going to show up very well because it's a very thin line and the Vectric software doesn't really show everything we need. And so it's missing a line right there, it's missing a line there, missing that line there in this particular representation. But if we check the visible box right here next to the grid lines, and then we see all the toolpaths in blue, it looks like it's doing everything, so we're in good shape. Now we need to create the second toolpath to carve the numbers. The first thing we want to do is come up to the layers area. It is currently selected on grid lines. We want to turn grid text on and turn grid lines off, and we'll select the grid text layer by clicking that so it is bold. And we will come out of here and we're going to close the preview toolpaths menu, and now we see all this text here, but we also see these toolpaths, so we want to clean that up. We're just simply going to uncheck the grid lines toolpath and that will get rid of that. Now we just need to select all the numbers there, and we are going to go into the V carving toolpath. We want to set our depth to 0, start depth. The flat depth should be unchecked, and now we need to select the bit. We want to use the same bit, the 60-degree ultra smooth cutting V-bit from IDC Woodcraft. So we're going to select that from the database, choose that. Again, the feeds and speeds are the feeds are down, so we won't change it here. We're just going to select that bit. So now we have the 60-degree bit. We're going to go over to edit and change our feeds there to 150 and our plunge to 60 and click OK. Using clearance tools should be unchecked. And all we have to do now is just name the toolpath. We're going to call it grid text, and that'll be 60V. Calculate, and now we have that toolpath as well. Let's preview all toolpaths, and there are our numbers. Good to go with that. Now it is time to save the toolpath, but first let's hit Control S to save the project. And all that's left now is to save the G code so that you can cut your grid on your Altmill CNC router. This has got to feel pretty good. If you've gotten something out of this video and you haven't done it already, definitely give me that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel because I am teaching you like this all the time. And I want a comment down below. How far did you get with this grid? Or if you have another CNC question, I try to shoot videos on the questions that people ask me. So I might call you out and shoot a video for you. Also, I want to remind you, I've got this, the grid cutting instructions for the 2x4 and the 4x4. I created the design for both machines, for both inch and metric. And you get the instructions and the G codes for every one of them. And if anything, this will walk you through how to set up your machine to make sure that you are set up properly to cut your grid. It's going to be handy. It's free to you. I'll link it down below in the description. Of course, drop by idcwoodcraft.com for your CNC bits because your projects need to look amazing and you definitely want to make sure you get good quality bits. So idcwoodcraft.com. With that, my friend, we are going to go save the toolpath, create the G code, and then you and I are going to part ways and you are going to start cutting the grid on your Altmill CNC router. So let's get to the G code. We're going to close out of preview toolpaths and now we're going to go into Save Toolpaths. Now what we want to do is make sure that under Save Toolpaths at the very top you have that third radio button selected, which is Visible Toolpaths to Multiple Files, and then check Group Where Possible. This will enable us to have one G-code file where it will carve the lines and the numbers in the same motion or in the same program operation. So now we want to select our toolpath, so we're going to just check this little checkbox next to the word toolpaths, and that's going to select both of them and then save the toolpaths. We want to make sure you're in the proper directory, Altmill 4x4 grid, and we want to name it that, so we're going to change that to Altmill 4x4 grid, and I'm also going to put in 60V in the name so that tells me what bit I'm using. Hit save, then we'll go to the directory of that, and there it is right there. It says Altmill 4x4 grid 60V, and we double click on that and open that up in Notepad, and there is the G code program. We are now ready to load that into the machine, but first again we just want to hit Control S. And there's only one thing left to do, and that is to cut the grid on your CNC router. I'm going to show you how to set up your machine based on the grid that we just put together in this video. The first thing, of course, is you need to get the right CNC router bit, the 60-degree engraving V-bit. And I like that because I like to get the nice thin lines. You don't want to make these grid lines real wide because then you start to lose your position corner when you're positioning your projects. And so you definitely just want to keep it shallow. This is the bit to use, the IDC Woodcraft Ultra Clean Cutting 60-degree V-bit. That's this guy right here. It is a knife blade style bit. And we're going to install it in the CNC router. Make sure you clean your collet nut. I already did it. And that bit should go about halfway in. And then you want to zero the bit off of the spoil board. So I'm using my probe. You want to make sure that the spoil board has been surfaced and is clean before you actually zero it out. In your control software, you will load up your G-code program for that and watch that thing load in the G-Sender control software. Then we are going to send the machine to the home position. So we want it to actually go home, so you need to use the home cycle if you have homing sequence on your machine. So mine is in the back left corner. So once we're there, we go back into the control software and you want to make sure that you set X and Y to 0. Now you can see I already have mine set up to 0, but if you don't, all you do is to hit the 0X button and the 0Y button if you have the G-Sender software. And simply hit the go button and your machine will start to carve. And with that, my friend, I will see you in the next video. IDCwoodcraft.com